What's up and welcome to the episode of Gizmo Slip. Today we're talking about why I tried switching from the Alienware Area 51M to the MacBook Pro 2019. And it all comes down to the brand new 8-core processor that's in the MacBook in 2019. This 8-core processor, the i9-9980HK processor, is a monster of a processor. And it's somehow in this little tiny thing. Okay, so I wanted to see, could the MacBook Pro actually replace my extremely powerful, this is literally probably the most powerful Windows laptop that money can buy, or at least it's tied right up there with the very best of the best, both for gaming and also for video editing. As you guys know, I do a ton of video editing, and so I was kind of very curious, could this replace my laptop from a gaming perspective? Could it replace my laptop from a video editing perspective, and also just an entertainment enjoyment device? The main thing that really piqued my curiosity was I was looking at reviews of the new MacBook Pro, and almost all of the reviews from users were extremely positive about the MacBook Pro. Now, the professional reviewers were bashing it pretty bad. I was like, you know what? I need to give this a shot and see what all of the fuss is about. Now, the first thing I noticed when I get the MacBook Pro home is that the display is just freaking gorgeous. Now, the Alienware has a great display as well. It's 144 Hertz, and to top it off, it's over 500 nits in brightness. This one's only about 300 nits in brightness. So this one's just dramatically brighter and also has better contrasting colors. So that was a big deal right off the bat. And then when I tried playing music, the speakers on the MacBook Pro absolutely freaking blew my mind. To have this good of speakers on a laptop that is this thin, I mean, just look at how freaking thin it is. It's insane to have speakers this good. They are 100% competitive with a laptop that is this thick. I don't know how Apple is able to put such good speakers in here. I mean, arguably the clarity is a little bit better on the MacBook Pro, and the default volume is also louder on the MacBook Pro. Now, when I tweak my Alienware speakers, I was able to get quite a bit more volume than the MacBook Pro, but it's really close. And I've tested a lot of laptops in the last 2 years, and this is by far the loudest thin and light laptop that I have ever tested. I loaded up some Netflix and I watched a movie with the speakers, and it feels like you're in a home theater environment with just your laptop. Not very many laptops have speakers that good. Now, I used to have a MacBook Pro about 10 years ago before they removed the NVIDIA graphics cards out of the machines. And I remember the touchpad being really good back then. But man, the new touchpad on the MacBook Pro is insane. Not only is it huge, not only is it smooth, the gestures are impeccable. 3 fingers up, you can switch apps. 4 fingers allows you to swipe left and right. 2 finger scrolling is the smoothest experience on just about any laptop. Now, I mean, the 2 finger scrolling is fantastic on the Alienware. It's like 2 thumbs up, but it's just like the best of the best for size and usability is this touchpad. One thing that makes this touchpad just so good is that when you click it, you can click it evenly throughout the entire touchpad. It's extremely responsive. And not only that, but you also have the deep press ability. The default action for a deep press is to do a dictionary lookup on whatever word that you're on. I would think of this deep press technology kind of like 3D touch on an iPhone. Now, the gestures on Windows 10 are very usable, but the problem is it's like Windows is not paying attention to the gestures, then you do them, and then there's all this legginess and jagginess, and there's a big delay, and then your windows are lined up and you can click it. With the MacBook, it's just instantaneous, it's smooth, it's consistent, and it makes navigating your apps that much better. So gestures definitely go to the MacBook Pro. Now, the next feature I want to talk about is the touch bar along the top of the MacBook Pro here. It's a very interesting additional display above the keyboard here, and there's a lot of functionality here, so let's break it down. When you're in Safari, the touch bar functions as a visual tab switcher and some additional functionality like opening a new tab. And then when a new tab is open, it provides the most commonly used links right there on the touch bar, making it really easy to use. And when you're watching a video in Safari, it switches to video controls with scrubbing capability. In the word processor pages, the touch bar turns into font and text controls. The tricky part with the touch bar is that if you don't have anything up, basically it doesn't do anything and you kind of lose this default functionality. Now the touch bar is amazing in its own way, but I mean in a lot of ways, for example, the Safari tab switcher works great when there's 2 or 3 tabs opened. But what happens when there's 10, which like I usually have like 10 or 15 tabs open? The visual switcher doesn't do anything at that point. It's just kind of visually in the way. So the touch bar's usefulness is going to vary heavily depending on what software you're in and how you're using that software and whether or not that software has really been optimized for the touch bar capability. And then we have the continuity between the iPhone, the MacBook Pro, the iPad, the Apple Watch. Now when I take a phone call, I can actually answer it right here on the MacBook Pro. When I want to respond to a text message, I can respond to it on the MacBook Pro. When I talk to Siri, I can talk to Siri on the MacBook Pro, create a reminder that then shows up on my iPhone. I mean, I love the continuity between all the different Apple devices. It's the Apple ecosystem, and it's one of the main reasons that people stay with Apple. Something else that's new since I tried a MacBook Pro is that they've integrated Touch ID directly into the MacBook Pro and into Mac OS. So instead of typing your password, oftentimes you can just use Touch ID. And the cool thing here is that the Touch ID works really well, unlike most Windows laptops. Now I've got this HP Spectre that I've been using as a replacement for my iPad lately, and I really, really like it, but the freaking fingerprint sensor is terrible. It only recognizes my thumbprint about 1 in 5 times, even though I'm trying to be really careful and very precise in how I put my thumbprint on there. With the MacBook Pro, you just put it on there and it works just like you'd expect. And then we have battery life. The MacBook Pro has freaking fantastic battery life. I mean, you can watch Netflix for like 8, 9, 10 hours, depending on what level of brightness you have. Not very many laptops can do that. And of course, if you do word processing, brightness, and Wi-Fi down, you can get well over 10 hours of battery life. I mean, who needs more than 10 hours of battery life in a single day? Not hardly anyone that I know. So really, really impressed with the battery life on the MacBook Pro. So clearly there's a lot to love about the MacBook Pro, but there's a lot of obvious downsides as well. First of all, we have the freaking very minimal travel keyboard. I type multiple pages every day, and the keyboard on this is one of the most infuriating keyboards on a premium laptop that I have ever experienced. The MacBook Pro keyboard from 4 years ago was amazing. Arguably one of the best keyboards on any thin laptop out there. And this one is like arguably one of the worst. Now I've done a lot of typing on it and I did adapt to it some. You kind of get used to the feedback. It's kind of a snappy feedback instead of like a deep shunk type feedback. But I seriously don't think I could ever type as well as I can on a keyboard like this one. The Alienware keyboard has like 2.1 millimeters of depth of travel. I really love the keyboard on this Area 51M. One of the most infuriating things about buying an expensive new tech gadget is that you get it home and then you realize that all of your existing tech gadgets like external hard drive, your mice, your keyboard, your monitor, none of those things connect to your new device. This thing only has 4 Thunderbolt 3 USB-Cs and 1 headphone jack. That's it, 5 ports. And you have to use one of them as the power port, so really you only have 3. It is so frustrating because I was trying to plug in a mouse. I couldn't do that. I was trying to transfer files to the MacBook Pro with my external hard drive. I couldn't do that. And I can't even plug it in to my external monitor. So I went to my local Best Buy and lo and behold, there is a whole wall of dongles, like a whole section just for dongles for a MacBook Pro. And these dongles aren't cheap. They should be like $5 to $10. They're like $15 to $35 to $40 to $50 for some of these dongles. So I did buy one of these fancy Thunderbolt 3 dongles, and I was actually tempted to use this with my Alienware, honestly. But it has 3 USB Type A's, a VGA, a LAN, a headphone out, a SD card reader, a micro SD card reader, an HDMI, and a Thunderbolt out as well. So this all comes from one port. If you're looking for a dock dongle, this is kind of the ultimate because it's just all in one, which is really nice. But I don't want to have to take this with me if I want to read an SD card reader or plug in my mouse. So if you can't tell, I'm really upset that Apple didn't put at least one USB Type A and that they removed the full-size SD card reader. Those are two crucial ports that I think every laptop has to have, and then ideally it also would have a Ethernet LAN port. Those are essential for doing normal laptop-y things. Now this laptop does have some expensive hardware, and in an attempt to keep it cool, the fans do ramp up and they can get a little bit loud. Now I measured this laptop just shy of 50 decibels of fan noise, so you're definitely going to notice it if you're doing something processor intensive, but the fans aren't super overwhelming either. Let's talk about how gaming works on the MacBook Pro. Well, when I loaded up Steam on macOS, and yes, you can install Steam on macOS, surprise, surprise, you can actually see which of your games are compatible. Now I have 148 games. Steam sales, dangerous. Anyway, out of those 148 games, 60 of them were playable on the macOS version of Steam. So there's a lot that transfers. Think about 30 to 35% of your Steam games might be playable on a MacBook Pro. So if you want to do some more serious gaming and be able to play any game out there, you're going to need to install Windows 10 using Boot Camp, and then you'll be able to play virtually any game and your performance should be quite a bit better as well. Now as far as gaming potential, I mean, this laptop is really designed to be like an ultimate gamer's dream because you got that high refresh rate display for super fluid and responsive gameplay. You've got much bigger and beefier fans that are able to cool those components, and then you have a full desktop CPU processor in the Alienware as well. So just the overall performance, this is obviously a gaming laptop. This is obviously designed to not necessarily be focused on that. Not that you can't do games with it though. All right, it's time to take a look at some benchmarks. Here we go, let's check it out. So first of all, we have the Cinebench R20 multi-score. We've got a score of 2978 coming out for the MacBook Pro, and this is the best CPU settings throttled score. This means that I'm running Cinebench R20 in a continuous loop and seeing, what is the average score over a bunch of runs. And as you can tell, the MacBook Pro is very competitive with a lot of cheaper laptops. Look at the HP Omen 15. It only costs $1,280, and they got almost exactly the same score. And the HP Omen's only using a 6-core processor. This thing's using an 8-core processor, but it's being so power limited that a 6-core processor from last year is able to beat the latest technology that also has more cores, which is kind of absurd, especially since you can buy 2.5 HP Omens for the price of one of these. Now, as you'd expect, the Alienware freaking dominates this test, coming in at 4,474 points at stock, and I even overclocked it and got close to 4,800 points. That's a big difference. Now, the really interesting thing here is that the 9980HK processor in the MacBook Pro, in theory, should be able to match very close to the 9900K's performance if this processor was in a thicker laptop that could actually cool the processor and also power the processor to reach those high clock speeds. Taking a look at the Cinebench R20 points per dollar, the MacBook Pro comes in at 0.9 points per dollar. The HP Omen comes in at 2.3 points per dollar. The Asus laptop at 2.09, and that Asus laptop is a very thin, very light laptop, just like the MacBook Pro. The MSI GP Leopard comes in at 1.89 points, and the Alienware comes in at 1.24 points, so still better than the MacBook Pro, but it's just not going to be able to compete against those budget laptops because this is pushing the envelope of what's possible for a laptop in terms of performance, and you're paying that premium amount. This one is pushing the envelope for how thin you can make it and still get okay-ish performance. So with that in mind, I came up with another graph, and this is points per pound of weight. So we've got the MacBook Pro coming in at 744 points per pound of weight, and that gives you an idea that if you're looking for the most possible performance per pound, this is a pretty cool option. It's not horrible, at least. One of the best ways to test to see how fast your laptop is to take Handbrake, which is a video rendering software, and just render a video clip, the same video clip on multiple computers, and you can get a good idea of the CPU performance. And you can see the MacBook Pro does beat out the Asus ROG and the GP75 Leopard, but it gets trounced by the Alienware, only taking 7 minutes and 20 seconds to finish the same 6-minute 4K clip. I am glad though that this thing is performing a little bit better than some of those other Windows laptops. Now I did some comparisons using Adobe Premiere Pro, and the results were really interesting. Depending on what codec you ran it on, the MacBook Pro actually beats the Alienware. So if you look at the H.264 codec tests here, the MacBook Pro rendered the video about 1 minute and 45 seconds faster than the Alienware, and this is again the exact same clip, but when you switch to ProRes codecs, the Alienware rendered dramatically faster. Now the reason the MacBook Pro can render faster in H.264 is because it utilizes something called hardware acceleration. Hardware acceleration is when you use the Intel HD GPU to assist the rendering speed. The Alienware can't do that, but other Windows laptops can, so that means that your render time using H.264 will vary a lot depending on whether hardware acceleration is enabled on that particular laptop. Okay, it's time to talk about some gaming benchmarks. Let's take a look at 3D Mark Firestrike. The MacBook Pro got 7558 and the Alienware Area 51M got 23991. That is an insane difference. That is more than 3 times more performance than you're getting with this particular machine, at least in this synthetic benchmark. And when you look at the other 2 laptops here, the MacBook Pro roughly has half the performance of the Asus laptop, and it compares even worse against the Aorus 15XA. So I mean, yikes, if you're just looking for GPU performance, this ain't it. Not at least for the money. Taking a look at the points for the money, the Asus ROG GX531, which is a laptop that I highly recommend if you're in the market for a thin and light gaming laptop. I'll have a link in the video description down below if you want to check it out. You can see that you're getting 10 points per dollar with the GX531, and you're only getting 2 points per dollar with the MacBook Pro. What the heck? It's just such a horrible value proposition. Take a look at 3D Mark Time Spy graphics. This is a newer, more up-to-date test. The MacBook Pro only gets 2700, the GX531 gets 5200, so roughly double again. A whole bunch of laptops are just doubling and tripling, and the Alienware is basically quadrupling the performance of the MacBook Pro in this render test. And then we have the Shadow of Mordor gameplay benchmark. This is the built-in benchmark preset to Ultra on both machines, and the resolution was actually a little bit less on the MacBook Pro because it wouldn't set to 1080p. We got 47 frames per second versus the 186 frames per second, more than triple, like 3.5 times the performance. Again, this is kind of what we're expecting, because this is a thicker laptop that's focused around gaming, but this is just to give you an idea of the performance. And then we have Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and I did 2 tests with the MacBook Pro. I did the native resolution of 3300p, and then also the 1050p resolution. So we have 85 frames per second on the native resolution, which is actually pretty good. I'm glad we're getting really good frames per second. And I actually threw in the benchmark from this Ultrabook right here, and it's actually able to play CSGO as well. And then of course the Alienware freaking killing it at 275 frames per second. Civilization 6. This is a very CPU bound game, and you can see that we got 38 frames per second on ultra settings on the MacBook Pro. The Spectre, again, I threw it in there for fun. So we had 35 frames per second on the Spectre. Keep in mind that the Spectre is actually running at a higher resolution but lower settings. Now this last graph is taking a look at the Handbrake CPU stress test. Basically, while I was running the Handbrake render, I was taking a look at the CPU stats, and we are just non-stop throttled right across the top. You're basically hitting maximum possible safe temperatures non-stop. You're barely above the stock clock of 2.4 gigahertz. You're hitting like 2.78 gigahertz pretty consistently. And the processor is being power limit throttled to right around 40 to 43 watts of power. And of course, the crazy thing is that the 9980HK is really not going to benefit you much at all, because you could have the 8750H, because that processor can easily take advantage of the 40 3 watts of power and get roughly the same performance on 6 cores as this one does on 8 cores, simply because the 6-core processor will be able to run at a higher overall frequency if it's running at the same wattage level. Giant waste of money getting the highest end processor in this laptop. If you're gonna buy a MacBook Pro, just get the lower end processors. It might be like 5% slower, maybe? All right, so how does Apple fix this complete mess of an expensive Ultrabook that they've got going here? First of all, they need to offer 2 models of the MacBook Pro. They need to offer a super thin version like this for people that want like an ultra portable Ultrabook that's really expensive and really doesn't have that great of performance, and that's totally fine. There's a segment of people that just want the most power in the most portable form factor. That's fine. And then Apple needs to make a thicker version of this machine that's like a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch thicker. And this thicker version of the machine will probably be a little bit heavier, but honestly not even that noticeable. But this small increase in size will allow for better and more ports. And a huge part of the ports equation here is that we're using a Thunderbolt 3 port to power the laptop. When you use a Thunderbolt 3 port to power a laptop, you are limited to a maximum of 100 watts of power. And that is going to severely limit the potential performance coming from the machine. So if you're going to make a thicker laptop, it would make sense to have a dedicated power port for a higher amount of power input. Now, when they add more ports, they could add a USB Type A, at least one of those, as well as a full-size SD card slot and an Ethernet port. This is the dream. And then because we have some increased thickness, they can actually put a keyboard in here that has deeper travel and that will have a lot better reliability. The last major change that Apple needs to do is they need to ditch AMD GPUs. Now, when they switched from NVIDIA to AMD GPUs a while back, it really wasn't that big of a difference in performance. You know, there was a dip, but it wasn't like drastic. Nowadays, the performance difference from the higher end chips in the AMD lineup just can't compete with the highest end chips in the NVIDIA lineup. And this is like the ultra high end performance laptop. It should have at least an RTX 2080 Max-Q option for the most possible performance in the smallest possible form factor. It only makes sense, okay? You're basically offering a Lamborghini here with like a 120 horsepower engine. It's like, what the heck are you doing? So would I recommend the MacBook Pro? I think you guys probably have got the gist here that not really, unless you just don't really care about performance for the dollar and you just want a semi-powerful machine in as small a form factor as possible, and you're probably also going to have an iPhone, an Apple Watch, an iPad, all that integrate really well with the compatibility from device to device. The way I see this MacBook Pro is it's like you're dating this girl. She's gorgeous, she has her life together, she dresses really, really well, but then you find out she never takes a shower and she's oddly obsessed with losing weight even when it's at a detriment to her health. And so basically that is what the MacBook Pro is. It's obsessed with getting as thin as possible, even when it's really hurting the performance. The simple fact is the MacBook Pro has transformed from a high-powered notebook lineup to being a overpriced Ultrabook that has a average level of performance. And it's really not a device that I can recommend to professionals looking to get any kind of high-end performance, and it's certainly not a device that I can recommend to people looking to get a decent bang for the buck. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button, and if you want to see more tech review comparisons, hit that subscribe button. I will see you in the next one. Brandon out.